Welcome to the Rising Entrepreneurs Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and their journey. Now, let's get started with the show.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Brent Wardrop of Elemental, and you can find him at elementalinc.com. And Brent, before I formally introduce you, I like to mention other episodes people should check out of the podcast. I had a really good one with Todd Taskey. Todd Taskey runs a company that matches private equity with agencies. And actually, he has a Second Bite podcast because sometimes when they sell to private equity, those agencies make more on the second bite than they do on the first. So it was really interesting to talk about valuation and the agency landscape, since this is part of the top agency series. That was a good one. Also, Kevin Hurrigan was a good one. He's been in the agency space since 1995 when he started an agency. So it was interesting to see the evolution of what he went through from the tech boom and bust and what happened to the industry. And he still is alive and kicking with Spinutech. So check that out and many more on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise25. At Rise25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships and partnerships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the accountability, the strategy, and the full execution. Brent, we call ourselves the magic elves that are working in the background to make it look easy for the host and the company so they can build amazing relationships, create great content, but also just run their company. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way to do that than profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com. And I'm excited to introduce Brent Wardrop. He's founder of Elemental. They call themselves the Human Connection Agency. They're a full-service collaborative agency. They work with clients to make their phones ring, right? Who doesn't want that? They've been fortunate to work with well-known brands such as Dyson, Scotiabank, Allergan, Shred-it, Honeywell, along with many, many, many more. And he's actually a former professional musician, and he pivoted to a new creative career after he was dropped by his record label. So we'll have to hear about that. And I found some of the most successful entrepreneurs, Brent, started in the music industry. They had to hustle to get butts in seats and to do all the stuff. It's a business too. So he started this creative firm, evolving into a full service, strategically led agency, working with some of Canada's largest brands. Brent, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks for bringing up that pain of me losing a record career.
We got to bring up the pain. It's the good stuff. Talk about your band for a second, how this got started.
So it was a solo act. I was signed to a label here in Toronto, and I had the privilege of making an album and touring all over, toured in the States, toured in Europe. And it was wonderful. It was a really great experience. It was, it's the sort of thing that, it's one of those things that as a youth, you find out you're good at something and you start digging into it, taking lessons, learning your craft, learning how to write songs. And eventually someone starts saying that they kind of believe in you. So you start down the road of pouring yourself into it. And for me, it was a good 15, 16 years of my life that was the only thing that mattered. Absolutely the only thing. And what happened was I was working on some solo stuff in a recording studio, and the engineer working at the studio just happened to, know a guy who owned a label and played the tapes, and we started talking, and next thing you know, I had this great opportunity. Unfortunately, like every other business, you have to actually sell the product to be successful. And albums sold well in overseas and outside of Canada, where I'm from, but they didn't sell well here. And so from a purely economic standpoint, it didn't make sense for them to continue investing in me. And at the time, I was devastated. I was absolutely destroyed. I mean, everything I'd been working for, it was a hard no. And by this point, I was I want to say 32, I think, thereabouts. And it's pretty hard to recover out of that. I admit I was terribly bitter, very bitter. But at the same time, I needed to eat, right? So I had a friend who worked at Honeywell, a company that makes thermostats, and he needed some posters made for the factory floor to, produce some morale posters. And I had designed some of my own literature as a musician, and he knew I was in a bind. So he asked me if I would make these posters. And so I had been noodling around with, at the time they called it desktop publishing. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, of
We're
course.
talking like
Yeah.
this would be 93, 94. And so I didn't know what I was doing, right? Other than having a bit of taste, I didn't really know what I was doing. So I had noodled around with some photography, and I took photos of glass. And glass, when you shoot it up close, has this wonderful organic quality. So I made these posters with images in the background. At the time, no one did that because, the images were 20 megs and my machine had 2 megs of RAM on it. So it would literally take 8 hours to render these things. But hey, I didn't know, and I had all the time in the world. So anyway, I made them, and then that landed me, it gave me some money for rent and food, which was great. But it also parlayed me into other relationships, because now with Honeywell as a client, I had the confidence that I could go out and start talking to other companies. And that led me through the doors of companies like 3M and the hospital group here. It's called University Health Network. They were good to me. And then with every successive, project, I just parlayed that into a greater reputational growth. And over time, I surrounded myself with people who are skilled, schooled, and simply better at various tasks. And now we're a almost 30-person team servicing clients across Canada. We have half our business is in America. We have clients in Europe, and it's just the best, because anyway, I'm probably going off on
It's
crazy
pretty
tangents here.
amazing that your
but-
first client was Honeywell, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I want to get to how you make it sound easy. Well, I'm sure it wasn't easy. Like, oh, we went to 3M and University of Health. I'm wondering how you actually approached those other companies. But first, talk pricing for a second. You were a musician. Your friend's like, hey, create these. How did you price that initial project?
He told me how much money they had, and I said, that sounds good.
So you had an inside, it helps to have an inside person give you some intel.
Well, and this was a long-standing friend. I had known him since I was in university, and he was a big fan of my music. And he, at the same time, I had a marriage that was going sideways. So like everything was going back to like nothing, right? And so this was a generous gift from him. Like,
Yeah.
truly. And then the pricing, I don't remember the name of the book, but I picked up a book about pricing creative work and about, learning how, because I've never worked in an agency,
Right.
I've never worked for anyone, in this industry. So I just picked up a book, and even, even at the beginning of me working with Honeywell and stuff, the first thing what I did is I went down to the local school that taught graphic design and bought every book. Now you don't even need it. All you need is YouTube now. But the truth of it is, when there's desire, you can learn anything. In my case, I really desired to eat. Yeah,
Totally.
eating was a good thing.
Yeah. It was funny because Brent had a conversation with someone yesterday. They said their first project, I forgot the company, it was a huge company.
Yeah.
And he's like, I usually charge $60 an hour. So I charge $120, and I figured it would take 2 hours. So I charged him $250 for the project. And like this huge company. And he's like, obviously they were thrilled, but he was like, I charged obviously too little. But he said over the following 2 years, they paid him like $230,000, whatever it was, because they just kept asking for more work. So I'm like, I guess it paid off that you were not crazy expensive for them. Talk about now you have Honeywell.
Yeah.
And you were smart. You're like, okay, now how do I parlay Honeywell into the next client because you have a good friend at Honeywell. So
Yeah.
how did you get into, what was the first milestone of client where you didn't know someone there?
Oh, so well, that came a little bit after, because my first thing was to figure out, wow, I can actually make money doing this, which shocked me. Wow, I could be shingling on a roof, right? Or this. So I like this, and I just really tapped everyone I knew, and I had a pretty robust fan base when I had a career, and some of the people I had become friends with, and so I literally just asked them, "Is there anyone you know that could help me?" And that became, I know this person who works here, but they might, and it just became this sort of, working the network, because this was before cell phones. This was really organic, and at the time, there, I don't think the freelance community existed. I don't even think the word existed at that time. So to have somebody show up and just say, "Hey, I can, help you with some stuff," was the sort of thing that they were having. Like at that time, my biggest competitor was the receptionist. They would kind of get her to, or him, to use Microsoft Publish. And then here I come along with CorelDRAW. Oh, man, I can use different fonts other than Arial. Mind blowing, right? And I personally have always had a very good work ethic, and I greatly respect the grace of when people give me work. Like I'm convinced that success is only based upon, people. And sure, there's the whole trust thing with work, but they're putting their own reputation at risk to hire you within their organization. So there's a deeper, more human connection that occurs in that decision making. And I think always having that sense of gratitude, even though personally I think that's a word that's becoming heavily outplayed, but really truly appreciating that someone has chosen to feed you. Like there's something really pure about that, and it's never lost me in all these years. It's never lost me that I am super fortunate.
Yeah. No, I love how you think about this because anytime someone hires you, if someone has this in their mind of they're putting their reputation at risk, right? Not like I'm entitled to get this work, but
Yeah.
more on the flip side, it makes me think a lot differently, or anyone, about that project, right? It's like this person's taking it super serious. They're taking me super serious, and I love that thought process that you go through with that. But I like also how you reached out. I mean, you weren't afraid to reach out to your network of people to ask for help. Like sometimes, I don't know, I found with some people I've talked to, like there's ego involved. They don't want to reach out for help. They feel like they can do it themselves. And so I like that aspect as well.
Yeah, but let's not get confused. I at the same time, I'm the sort of guy that I hate to ask people for things because I'm just not built that way. But literally, when you have nothing, no prospects, no way like no future, because your entire like everything you've done up until then is done. There's a certain urgency that comes with, hunter be hunted, or and I mean I'm probably I probably minimize what that was like at that emotional state, but it was desperate.
Hmm.
And it's good. I think at the same time, I didn't have anyone chirping in my ear that I couldn't do it. So, I think that I just did it because I had to, and it's paid off.
What was the kind of music, and what was the album called?
Well, the music is pop music. Um,
What was it? Were you sing? It sounds like you were a singer, songwriter. Did you play an instrument? What was it?
I play a little bit of keyboards, but nothing anyone would want to hear. I'm not very good. I wrote with writing teams. So um, we would collaboratively work on stuff where I would sing melody lines or or bass lines, and then they would chart them. The music was gothic pop. I was reading a lot of Anne Rice at the time that I wrote my album, that particular album, and it musically it's very, very upbeat and power poppy, but the music is all about, I don't know if you know Bauhaus, and it was pretty dark stuff.
Oh, okay.
It was all about,
So can we find the album? Is it online somewhere?
Yeah, it's so I have the last name Wardrop, about as sexy as a tin can, right? So I and even my own company, I didn't put my name on the lights because it's always more than just you, right? And but yeah, so the band name is Veil, Veil, which was just me and a couple of great brothers who produced it with me. And it's the album is called The Savage Garden. It's available on Spotify and Apple.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
So we should put it on the front of this interview somehow.
You do whatever you want.
Or the back of this interview.
For sure. You do your thing.
So milestones. You kept getting clients and reaching out. Talk about the hiring milestones in the company. Some key hires. It could be positions. It doesn't have to be people specifically, but some key positions that it stopped just being you.
Okay. Yeah. Because it has been me for a long, long time, and there's a wonderful joy in that. To be honest with you. Okay, so I think what was most noticeable was the first hire. So I had been working with a client, and at this time I'm a designer, just a print designer, and they had their own copywriter. Copywriter botched the job. I didn't QA it. Went to press. Big mistakes. Lost the account. So my first hire was a writer, because I figured if I'm going to be responsible for it, then I better own the whole process. And it's funny because the reason I've started the company, on one hand it was out of money, but at a very quickly after that initial experience in hiring my first hire was really around making sure that we provided a quality product, to the client. And I've always been driven by that. It's because that engenders deeper relationships, and the money always kind of came later. And then I think,
how did you find that writer?
I don't know. I don't remember. It's like 20 plus years ago. Because I never really socially was active in the community. Because again, I didn't even know this was a thing. Like, I didn't even know there was, I knew nothing. I didn't know anything about ad agencies, marketing agencies. I knew zero. I just kind of got successful doing this and thought, I can make money doing this, and just did it. So yeah, the first writer, and then, people come and go. And then there was a point where we were getting too busy where I had to hire other designers. And at first that was hard to take, because I really love the whole creative, actually doing the production work. But for me to be able to, because at that time I was out representing the company, right? Wearing, cool clothes and out meeting all day. And then I'd work all night. That was my schedule, right? It was crazy. And then ultimately I hired people to do the work so that I could actually function properly.
Talk about that schedule for a second.
Yeah.
So you wake up, what you did, then actually went to bed. In those days, what did that span look like?
Oh gosh.
I don't know if you remember those days, but
I remember those days.
Sometimes you can't forget those days, right?
I don't, it's funny. I've never really talked about it much with anyone, thanks for giving me the air on that. It was delicious. It was exciting. Every day was a hunt, and every night it was like bringing it home. And it was, I'm a very social person. I love people. I genuinely love people. And to go out and meet new people during the day. I mean, it wasn't every day, because I didn't get meetings every day. But as it got busy, I'd be out hustling. And then at night, I mean, again, I had come off a relationship. So I wasn't really in a headspace to, plug into anything else. And I was probably repairing myself on a lot of different levels. Like the whole music thing. I didn't talk about my music career for 10 years
Wow.
at all, right? To anybody. And it's a bit of a good story, but the truth of it was such a hard chapter end that I decided I was, sealing that up and putting it away. But back to your question, there was a time that we evolved into become what is now called a digital agency. So so being active at the very beginning of user interface web, we started getting web stuff. So I started buying web guys because I couldn't do the work. So that was actually probably the first key hires were people that had skill sets that I had no ability time wise or interest in learning, as far as coding and that sort of thing. And that's never been my jam, not my thing. And so we took the business to the point where we were almost 30 people at that time just doing enterprise websites, and I hated it. I absolutely
Why?
hated it because it was all technology. It wasn't about making that
Because it wasn't your thing. It wasn't the design.
Well, so this is my personal thing. This isn't a company ethic, but my personal thing is, if you take money from someone, back to that whole idea of that people put their self in your hands a little bit as a client. I've always been sensitive to whatever whatever you hire me for, you got to make a definitive return on, right? So I've been more interested in what is now called performance marketing, and always being able to show the efficacy and the wisdom in hiring my company. And with web at that time, this was the land of, like, our largest site was like, 12,000 pages in 7 languages, like complex beasts. Did they support a company? For sure. Did they deliver on its larger, company goals? Absolutely. But could they really sit down and go, you know what? Through that investment of X, we made this? Probably not. And so in the end, things were already starting to dive with, the advent of companies overseas doing, web for a dime on the dollar. So literally totally pivoted the agency to an area that we're much more interested in as a group. And that's more, B2C, work that develops relationships between brands and their customers, which is what we do today. But I do want to point something out. You asked about pivotal hires. I have a partner now, Dustin Brown. He's terrific, amazing guy, and he came to the agency as a sales guy, as a new business guy, and he also came with experience from one of Canada's larger agencies. And he's a real creative guy that has a lot of drive. And very soon in the relationship, I knew that if I didn't make him an offer to become part of the company in a real definitive way, he'd find his own path. And so he's been with the agency now. It's going to be 13 or 14 years. He's been a partner for 10 of those. So this whole pivot into more of the public facing B2C was a big part of him coming on board. So I saw the decline of business in the pure digital space as far as websites go, and pivoted. And it was risky. At that time, that was another real dark time. I had to leverage my house to keep things going, because there's a dip in income, and it was tough, and this was all 2012, the echo of 2008. And so, riding that wave, I honestly don't know if I even answered your question, but if you're
I mean, it sounds like the hires went from writer because you wanted to own if you're responsible, you want to own the process.
Yeah.
Then it went to getting a lot of work.
Yeah.
So that you need to hire more people like you so you could step out of that. And then you were getting demands for other stuff. So you brought on web people. And then another one obviously was a partner, a sales partner. And I'm curious on the partner front.
Yeah.
You wanted to keep, you saw this person, they're going to be amazing. You wanted to keep them.
Yeah.
People say partner and it means different things. What were your thoughts on keeping this person? Did that look like, and you don't have to say numbers, but did it look like I'm going to give them an equity stake? Does it look like, what were the components you want to include that means partner to you?
It was an equity stake. It was a scenario where he could earn in a way that benefited, like as the whole company prospered, he would have a share of that prospering because he was so instrumental in its growth, which has proven to be true. Absolutely. And yeah. And
what advice did you get around setting up an equity stake? Because here's the thing.
Yeah.
But like you just said, you look back, you were hustling, you were working, who knows, 20 hours a day, you leveraged your house, and now you bring someone in.
Yeah.
It's a big deal, right? How did you think about, what advice did you get around, how do I structure this equity stake?
I didn't get enough. I went to some lawyers, talked to some lawyers. At that time I was, at that time I was still suffering the view that it's about me and I'm going to just figure it out and I'll do it. And I didn't have the wherewithal to really seek out a number of opinions, I didn't see the value in it and understand it. No, I'm fortunate. It's turned out terrific for us. But there's some things that I might have changed, but from a larger material fact, I'm very happy. It's been a very good partnership. And it's been, he has been, I'll say we have been instrumental because we're really good. We're not the same. We're very different people. And I think what I knew was it wasn't just his ability in new business, because he's running all of our strategy now. He still contributes to new business. Both he and I still go out and hunt the work, but it was seeing all of the other character attributes that laddered up to this is the right guy.
How did you, with the equity part, you don't have to say numbers, but how did you set it up? Like, did it vest over a couple of years? How did you decide? Did he have to pay anything in, or is just part of it? How did you think of setting up the equity piece?
Okay, so I'm going to answer the question of how I did. I'm not going to say whether it was good or not, because I don't know, because it's the only experience I have. Because I've had this discussion with others, and they've been fairly, feeling that it should have been done a different way. But the way it was done was, at the time, he was new business. And so it seemed the most rational thing to do was to attach it to a vesting on revenue associated with new business over a period of time. And so as each milestone was achieved, more equity was dispersed to him. Yeah.
So it was based off of revenue.
It was based off revenue.
Yeah. Which makes sense. There's kind of like a base of where the company's at. And then as we increase, you kind of give them equity based on these milestone increases.
Well, and I'm sure you've run into this with other people you've talked to, Jeremy, but one of the biggest challenges for a company that's bootstrapped from zero is that, I getting around the idea of KPIs and what are they? What are measurable results? Like it's so laborious to even figure out how to get granular in someone's performance and still be out hustling and doing the work. Right. So the dollars was easy to measure. So
what were people disagreeing with in that when you've had conversations?
I think the biggest thing that's come out, and I don't want to be too revealing because, there's, other people involved in this conversation, specifically my partner.
Sure.
But I think the biggest thing has been around me not requiring him to buy in. A lot of people have said that people that buy in care more. Maybe not. I haven't seen any wavering on his caring for the company or his goals, or so my experience has been it's been good.
Yeah, it's all your experience, right? So I want to talk about some of the work you do.
Yeah. Okay.
And let me, I'm going to share my screen for a second. You can see here, if you're listening to the audio only, there is a video, and we're on elementalinc.com. And if you look at this page, I'm going to scroll down to our work. They've done some amazing work. I watched a bunch of these videos. They're really cool. I love the Oceania ones that drop in the ocean. I want to talk about the No Excuses Day,
Mm.
because you were mentioning measurable results. You're talking about human connection, and I feel like this one kind of encapsulates those things. Can you talk about what you did with No Excuses?
Yeah. So No Excuses Day was um, for an organization called Scene. Scene is a loyalty program that at the time was co-owned by Scotiabank, one of the big five banks in Canada, and Cineplex, which is a large theater, the largest, hands down by far, uh, movie theater company. And we've been working with Scene for 13 years now. And this was done in just before COVID, the year before, so 2019. And we had been building up with Scene over these 13 years on how to keep their members engaged. It's like any other organization. It's about getting new members, in this case, versus consumers or customers, and getting engagement, getting them to actively be a participant in the organization or in the event. And so what happened was we were tasked by Scene to come up with a really big campaign, something that was really going to move the needle. We had already taken the brand from 1.8 million to over almost 13 million members, which is about a third of the population of Canada. And when you look at actually who's active in the loyalty program, it's probably 2/3 or maybe even higher of Canadian from a demographic perspective. But so this campaign, the idea of it was, as we went forward and tried to figure out how we were going to deal with it, is we landed on the idea of creating a specific day, like an event, and making something of that event and developing a campaign that would lead up and trickle into and accelerate, excitement and desire to that day. And the insight was found really through truth. It was about the simple truth that even though when people want, I should back up just for our members outside Canada, Scene is a really big deal here. Like, it's a really big deal. And what it was, it's changed now because they brought on other partners. But fundamentally, you would go to movies, earn points, and go to see free movies. And they widened that. They have a number of other partners like restaurants and all sorts of like other event and entertainment. Now they're tied into groceries. So you can use your points a lot of places. But at the time, it was all about entertainment. So the insight was about people want to have fun, but they'll make excuses not to have fun. And to really vet the idea, we just went out on the street with a camcorder and do they still call them it's a phone. Sorry, a phone.
I know what you mean by
that. and ask people that, like, do you ever make excuses when your friends call you to go have fun? And overwhelmingly, people on the street would be like, yeah, sometimes I do. And then we'd ask them, what do you say? It was everything like, oh, I got to take care of my cat. Oh, I got to do my hair, right? People would come up with all sorts of, and they just want to sit in their house and watch TV. They just don't want to go out. They don't want to socialize. And it became, the insight on it was, it's all about knowing that people make excuses and encouraging them. Let's not make excuses. Let's get together and let's have fun. Let's have a moment. And that moment is brought to you by Scene. And it was a massive success. The pickup on it was huge. It was a national event. It was actually listed as a day, like a national holiday. And it was called Scene No Excuses Day. In fact, we got such pickup on it. It was even featured in a joke by Ellen DeGeneres on her TV show, which is quite something for a Canadian thing to be referenced on an American broadcast show, which was quite an endorsement for us. And to date, this is the biggest thing that Scene has done. It was very successful. We were surprised at how much pickup we had with new members that were stimulated to join. But more so, just the the actual activity that was measured over a 6-week cycle before the event was it outpaced every projection, to the point of where, for the agency, we won a number of meaningful golds for this work. And it's work that as an agency, we're very, very proud of.
Talk a little bit about the creative process in this, right? I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into this. What are some of the stages that you had to go through to get to the end product?
Hmm. Well, it all starts with the brief of what the client wants. And what we try to, and again, this was easier with this client because we have such a long-standing relationship. We understand each other. We know how to work together. But it was really distill down what they wanted to achieve from an organizational perspective, and not the thing, right? So many times clients come and they have it in their head already of what
Like, I just want a
channels to use.
video or something. They just
Yeah.
say they're talking about the features, not the benefits. Type of thing.
Yeah. And you know what's so funny is almost every time they're wrong. Almost every time that isn't the actual thing they need. That'd be like going to your doctor, right, and prescribing the drug you need. Although I'm sure there's people that do that. Let's not talk about the opioid.
All the time. Yeah.
But yeah,
but they could be wrong, and that would not be good, right? So
exactly. But yeah, they basically identified that they wanted to see a lift in engagement. They wanted to be, over the 10 years we were with them, it was a highly pragmatic relationship where it was very much, trying to drive work, like drive engagement through very direct communications. And what was delightful about the ask from the client is they wanted a pure brand move. They wanted to increase brand love. That's where the whole thing started. They just wanted for people to love what they're all about. And there was such a wonderful purity to it. So back to the creative process. Sorry, I tend to go off the rails a little bit. Forgive me. We sat down, we looked at that, and we looked at a number of different potentials, like I think most agencies do. And we tackled it from 3 potential perspective ways we could go forward. And we gave them an idea that was kind of in line of the things they had done before, but with, 1 or 2 steps away. And then one that was more adventurous. And then the one they chose was, you've never done anything like this. And they put their heart and their money behind it, because the idea was just purely about this day, and then driving activity over a longer period into a day. So it was almost like reversing a traditional model where you're going to run out of home for, 6-week cycles or 12-week cycles. So where in this case, we just backed it out and started dripping, because the client has a lot of owned, right? They have 13 million members. So the ability to talk to these members was available through email and through apps, and it's in movie theaters. So we ran, like pseudo advertisements, pre-show, right? So there was a lot of avenues for us to tap, and so the creative process really, in fact, I would say the hardest thing was to stay pure to the idea of it just being a day about getting together and having fun, and staying simple and true to that idea of, don't make an excuse. Come on, let's go play.
It sounded like it took on a life of its own, and it's pretty cool that it created a holiday.
Well, and I think you're right. And when we all look at work that we all admire, they all tend to start in a room somewhere in an agency. Actually, I'd say that they start together with a client in a room somewhere. But then when they become something of their own, nobody owns it anymore. Everybody owns it, right? And I would argue that's what brand love's all about, is when it's not just the brand that owns the brand anymore, the community is now a part of it. And I think besides the accolades that we received endorsing the quality of our thinking, which is amazing, especially when you consider, whence I came. But you look at that and you see that the community really gets a lot of this. There's a real purity to the work, of the value it brings people. It was great.
Thanks for sharing that, Brent. I have one last question before I ask it. I want to point people to check out elementalinc.com to learn more about what Brent and their company are doing. I encourage you to check out our work page. They have some amazing videos, including I like the CFL one. That's pretty cool. And they have some really amazing ones with Oceana as well. Check those out. My last question is, early on, I find that there's a lot of accidental agency owners. They just stumble into it, however, and there isn't like a clear path, and we're just kind of doing it. And then over time, we develop help and mentors. And I know it's funny because we were actually at the same event a couple of days ago, and we didn't bump into each other at EO Eccentric. And right. Talk about some of your most influential mentors, and maybe a piece of advice. It could be from EO. I imagine there's a number of people that have been influential to helping.
There definitely have. It's I wish I had prepped for this a little bit before. I think for me, I've learned so much from so many different people. It's really hard to like. I've never had a formal mentor, so if I had, that would be easy to say. This guy. But along the way, I've had some incredible clients actually. That have been sensitive to the fact of my knowledge in the industry and to even share what other people have done for them, so that I could refine, my personal approach and also, influence the agency to better serve our clients in that respect. My dad, I mean, this is probably so clutch, right? That I'm going to say, oh, my dad, but the truth of it is my dad and I had a very friction-filled relationship, but he did leave me one thing that was been really helpful. And he drilled it into my head as far as I can remember. He would always say, if you're going to do something, do it right or don't do it. And that, I don't think I realized it until into my 30s that I had actually been living by that for as long as I can remember. So I'm not an athlete. I admire athletes immensely. I love watching various sports and what they go through, but I'm not that guy. And as soon as I knew I'm not that guy, I'm done. I'm done trying to be that guy. And all the way along, finding things, because you don't really know what you're good at. Like, do you remember in high school, you'd go to all these different clubs, camera club or something club, and then you turn on something that was really to turn you on and you're good at. I think I never stopped doing that. I'm still doing that.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to find new things that maybe I can noodle away with. And it doesn't have to be professionally related. Just I'm curious. And life's good. There's a lot to explore.
Brent, I want to be the first one to thank you. I love that. Do it right or don't do it. And actually, Magic Johnson, I know that we saw speak, told a similar story with him and his dad when he was helping his dad pick up trash. And so it really resonated, like similar concept. So I just want to be the first one to thank you, Brent. Thank you so much for sharing your journey story. And everyone check out elementalinc.com. And thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Rising Entrepreneurs Podcast. This episode is powered by Rise 25. Please subscribe and check out future episodes.